It is the end of the year, so that means one thing. Lists. Best of
Tons of lists.
Lots of lists. So this is our first of 2 videos, but there'll be even more on the website. So Kyle and I this year decided to, organize ourselves and actually score every car we drove. Now, we didn't count first drives, and we didn't count, say, fests, like Test Fest.
Quick drives.
Yeah, the one we did for Mama. So we drove, I think I counted over 130 vehicles that had scores. So we're splitting it. Yeah, we're splitting it into, if you count all the other cars, probably well over 200, but we're splitting it into 2 lists. This is cars, i.e. cars, and the other one will be sport utilities, which will cover pretty much anything that's not a car. So a pickup, a van, anything. We could just call it utilities, but that's confusing to people. So anyway, we'll get on with this list. So we will get started with the top 10, and there will be controversy. So let's get started.
Number 10, the Jetta Volkswagen GLI.
Okay, so the first vehicle on this list, number 10, is something I drove. I don't think you've driven.
I have not. I've driven actually, this is the pre-facelift, right? Because
this is the pre-facelift
25, but I know exactly where that spot is. But I'm a big fan of the pre-facelift. So tell me why you enjoyed the first facelift of this car.
Yeah, because that's, like you said, the 25's out now, and we actually had someone drive it, and we haven't. I plan to this winter, which is ironic because I drove the 24 in the winter. Well, in the winter. It didn't get published till April, but there's definitely snow back there. Yeah. So there are 3 reasons I like this car so much. One is, this is right in the title there, it's the only one really left of the manuals for Volkswagen. It's gone in the Golf and it's gone in regular Jettas. And if you have a over 200 horsepower 4-door sedan with a manual, there's 2 basic competitions. There's the Civic Si and there's the Elantra N, and price, power, performance, it lands right between the 2. It's better than an Si. It's not as crazy as an N, but it's also not as compromised or expensive. So I think it's one of those highly underrated vehicles. And I always say about the Jetta. And this was the 40th anniversary that got the 2-tone sort of paint, the gray with the red accents. And it's just a good overall vehicle. Like, it's something at my point in life and age and stuff, I could just totally see myself driving every day.
No, that makes a ton of sense. My experience with it, the previous one, was it's an excellent all-around car like the Jetta, and like you said, the Jetta just gets overlooked. It's an underappreciated model in its class, and then this is just sportier. You get all the good bits of a GTI, but in the practical under the radar shape of the Jetta. It's really good, and as much as I enjoy the Si, the Jetta's probably the better car.
Yeah, I think it's sportiness. I think it's a little better. It's up to person's opinion, but as sophisticated as the Civics become, like, the Jetta's always felt more premium, and it's big, like the Civic and the Elantra, so it really fits in with those 2. So that was number 10. Moving on.
We have a tie at 8 with the Chevrolet Corvette Eay.
So we have a tie between 2 cars for 8th. So we'll start with one that I drove, and then we'll go into one Kyle drove. So for me, we've really changed the spectrum here, but it is a Chevrolet Corvette Eay, the vehicle that I absolutely loved. And having a vehicle that's, well over 6 figures to start on this list may seem a little crazy, but it's just so good for a Corvette. You can drive an electric power front-wheel drive, you can drive all-wheel drive, you could put it into rear drive to do some cool burnouts, and on the city streets, it's the best bet because you get traction in all scenarios. You don't have to downshift the 8-speed dual clutch on the highway or city to accelerate because the electric motor takes care of it. I liked it way more than I thought. Oh, and it's got the Z06 wide body, so it doesn't look awkwardly long like regular Vets.
I'm honestly shocked because you put this list together. I mean, I could have looked at the scores, but I haven't. And I'm honestly shocked to see this as low as it is.
Yeah, there's just a lot of good cars. And I think part of it is it's an expensive sort of jack of one trade car. But if you're you, Kyle, in like 20, 30 years and you're retiring and you have no kids, like, this is what I'd want to drive. I could drive it all winter, throw on winters, and off you go.
Yeah, it really does match the 911 in the sense that the 911 is an all-year supercar. And I think we talked about this actually when you first reviewed it. We made that comparison that this is kind of the GTS of the lineup. And it succeeds as an all-rounder. And I just want to clarify too, since we just touched on scoring. At the end of the day, I think we all score these things. You and I score them based on like fitness for purpose. And that's why all these cars scored highly, because they do what they were designed to do so well. And the Vet does it exceptionally.
Like you said, it's a 911 direct competitor, and I don't really know which 911s we drove this year, but none of them made it up here. But that's always sort of the standard of a crazy nice sports car that you can use in everyday life.
Yeah.
It's not always the case with a lot of cars.
I actually don't think I drove a single 911 this year.
That's probably why it's not on here. So what tied the Corvette? Whoa, went the wrong way. All right, let's try that again.
Also, number 8, the Toyota Prius Prime.
So, just like the Corvette, it's a gas, electric, all-wheel drive hybrid, right? Same car.
It's basically the same. It's got the slope
Just
of...
reverse.
Yeah, it's got the windshield slope of a Lamborghini. It's very exotic. It's the 2024 Toyota Prius Prime, although it's no longer called the Prime for 25. It's just called the plug-in hybrid. I understand that Toyota is doing the SEO thing, but I liked the Prime name. I really enjoyed the Prius Prime. It is exceptional. It's all the car you really need day to day, although I guess if you're regularly sticking people in the back, maybe not so much, because the back seat is a little tight with that great roofline. But it's 220 horsepower, so it's quick, like surprisingly quick for a Prius. It handles pretty well because it's on the same platform that it shares with the GR Corolla. It will do, like quite a lot of distance on just electric power if you're feeling up to it. And so, like, for someone like me who lives in the city, who rarely has to stick people in the back, it's fantastic. It does all the stuff I would want. I would need a plug at home to really make it work, though.
Is this the all-wheel drive or front?
Front drive, because the Prime can't be had with all-wheel drive. And then in Canada, rather confusingly, the regular Prius is only all-wheel drive. But yeah.
Oh, I thought it had it. That's interesting. I'm surprised they didn't put the little electric motor boost in the back for it. I guess they need a bigger battery for the plug-in, so no space anymore.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably it, but it's interesting. I mean, if you want an all-wheel drive plug-in hybrid from Toyota, I'm sure they'll sell you a RAV4, or they'll put you on a list to sell you a RAV4.
Exactly. So I can't disagree. I haven't driven the Prime. Well, actually, I got very minimal seat time, but I like the Prius a lot, so this totally makes sense. And like the Vet, I'm actually kind of surprised it was where it is, but I think it's because this was the Prime and not the hybrid, where you don't get all-wheel drives, a little more money. I mean, it's a better car, but
yeah.
All right, moving on.
A 3-way tie for 5th starts with the Mazda Miata MX5.
So now we enter a 3-way tie for 5th.
Jeez.
And starting off, I thought I'd get the car that both makes total sense and makes no sense to be on this list. So for starters, it's a 2023 MX5 that I drove early last winter before the 24s arrived. So it's almost like a 2-year-old car, but it hasn't changed much since its big refresh when it got the more powerful engine. And I mean, it's a Miata. I don't know how much more I can say about this. It's everything the Corvette was before, but in a smaller, way more affordable package, and less space, but also less size, less fuel. And I purposely did this in the winter because it is a good all year round car. If you don't live somewhere that regularly gets like 3 feet of snow, like North Dakota or Buffalo, it can handle decent snowfall, especially somewhere like where we live that gets plowed pretty quickly. And then in the summer, top down and have a blast. And it's fun at any speed, which is a big plus. Something you can't say about the E-Ray, because you need to triple the speed limit to get that thing into its fun zone.
Yeah, it's true. You can't say that about most modern performance cars, really. Most cars, you need a track to really have fun, and the Miata is the one that just, you can do it at, city speeds.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, it's small, and the whole point is just being a commuter driving downtown. And if you live in a huge urban city, you get that nice little size advantage of sort of a subcompact when you're trying to park or maneuver around delivery trucks or whatnot.
Yeah. The funny thing is I did drive the 24 in the summer, but it didn't make the cut. But you know, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just you got a slightly updated infotainment and tweaked looks. I mean, very subtly tweaked looks. I'm very curious to see what Mazda does now, because this is going on a decade old. We're gonna have to get a new one at some point, right?
The NE.
The NE. Yeah.
I wonder too if the one you drove in the summer didn't score any higher because it was in a comparison, and compared to the vehicles it was against, it flaws, as few as they are, showed a little more.
True, like it is pricey for what you get.
Yeah.
Our next fifth place finisher is the BMW i4 xDrive 40.
Something Kyle drove. Again, we're all over the map here.
Yeah. This is, and mine's electrified again. Mine is in fact all electric. It's the 2024 BMW i4 xDrive 40. I drove this at the beginning of the year, just like you did with the Miata, and it stayed with me because it's such a good all-rounder. BMW has gotten a lot of flack the last few years for, let's say, divisive looks, or supposedly not really catering to the enthusiast market as much as it used to. But on the flip side, this is such a well-balanced vehicle. The 4 Series Grand Coupe is the best vehicle on that platform in terms of like shape and looks. I think it's really elegant. I don't even hate the nose anymore. And then the i4 is all electric. The xDrive 40 is the perfect blend where you get dual motors, you get all-wheel drive for people who live in less than perfect weather, but it's still like 390 horsepower or something like that. It's close to 400, and yet it gets 300 miles of range. And like any German electric car, the quote for the range is conservative. It's really easy to beat it. So it's just such a easy car to live with every day.
Yeah, like I said, it's a 4 Series that just happens to be electric. And
yeah,
BMW's really good at, they've developed their powertrains where it feels more natural than some EVs that are like on-off switches. So yeah, and the chassis is good. It can handle the extra weight. Well, probably because all BMWs are getting heavy. But
it's true. It's true.
And our final 5th place tie goes to the Honda Civic Sedan Touring.
And we'll go to the last car that tied for 5th, and that is back to me, and it's the Honda Civic Touring, our 2022 car of the year, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And we revisited it, having been 2 years later, almost 3 years later, really. And yeah, it's still really good. It's sort of like we were talking about the Jetta earlier. This is the regular version. And I think at this point it flip-flops where I go Civic over Jetta at this point. Although the Jetta is really good, but the engine, chassis, steering, size, styling, quality, like it just does everything well. We've said it many times on this. It makes the Accord pretty much redundant at this point, especially now that this isn't it, but this year there's now the hybrid. This was the last year of the turbo, which I always like that engine. The hybrid's got more power and better efficiency, so you can't really go wrong there.
Yeah,
it's just a good car. I'm happy it made this list because it deserves to. It's sort of like an evergreen car that should always be up here because it's probably the best. If someone says I need a new car and they give me no sort of other filters or regulations or ideas, it's like Civic. Just go get yourself a Civic.
Yeah, no, totally. It's so good, and it remains so good, and it's something that Honda just has a lock on. Like, it's now, you mentioned the hybrid model, which we're going to drive in a matter of weeks. I'm very much looking forward to it because, yeah, it's a new engine, and I'm sure that'll be great. Even for the slightly more money, you get all that extra fuel economy and more power. But no matter how far along in its life a Civic generation is, it's still either class leading or very nearly there. And it feels like that's the case for this. Like, this is a 4-year-old car now. Still the best thing.
And even when they fumbled, I think it was the 2012 model year, they reversed that so quick, and it still sold pretty well, and it still wasn't terrible. It's funny you say we're going to drive this in a couple weeks because we're going to drive the hybrid against the Prius, which was also on this list. So there we go.
Mm-hmm.
All right. now we're getting into the top 4.
Tying for third is the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT.
Starting with a tie for
Another tie.
Yeah, it's sort of the top 3 with 4 cars. But this is, you, Kyle, didn't drive this. I know you gave me many chances too. It's just I couldn't get the timing to work. But it's like what, like a 100 horsepower commuter or something?
Yeah, it's a super rational vehicle from the company that only builds super rational vehicles. Yeah, so our contributor Kunal actually did the first drive, and I drove the car back home here, and it was actually a very similar spec to what he drove. It's the really nice purple, the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT, which is a 4-figure horsepower sedan. The one here actually had the rear seats. So it wasn't a 2-seat 4-door, but
5-door, really
bonkers. And like you said with the Eay, it seems silly to have a car like this specialized and this expensive on this list, but I mean, the Taycan does stuff that few other cars do. It's crazy. It hurts accelerating, which is something I'm not entirely used to. There are plenty of quick EVs out there, but this is a whole other level. And it's really funny because they have a new air suspension that actually just shoots up and down when you get in and out. And it's not quick. It's like it's a half second, and it launches up like 2 or 3 inches. It's like, it reminds me of like a gymnast, like at the Olympics when they're like prepping for their floor routine, how they're just like so bouncy. That's what this is. And yet it's still like, if I reeled it in, because I only had it for a little bit, you reel it in and you drive it like a regular Taycan, and no one knows the difference except, well, it's got a wing on it and a ridiculous purple color.
Yeah, I'm happy Porsche is sticking with Turbo GT to kind of signify their top, because if they keep putting that on vehicles, people will start to catch on, because their naming conventions are all over the map for every model.
Yeah.
So this makes sense. And how you said, like, a car like this on the list, I liken it almost to, this is showing what an electric car could do if you just don't care. It's almost like when Bugatti brought out the first Veyron, and they were like, hey, look, if we just put on every cylinder and every turbo, look how fast we can make a car.
Yeah.
And it's a theme in the top 3, because another similar idea will show up later, but this is the extreme in every sense of size, price, power, performance.
Yes.
Color purple.
Also tying for third is the Porsche 718 Spyder RS.
A Porsche Kyle drove.
That's right. I drove these back to back, and I think it's really funny. I noticed when I scored them, because I scored them completely, blind. I didn't compare scores. They ended up the same score. And I think it shows what a challenge it is in our current changing times to create a good EV or a good ICE car. And I think Porsche finds that balance really well. These cars couldn't be more different. The Taycan is tons of power, so good with everything it does, so quick. And then the 718 is the final hurrah of the box-turn Cayman. It's the open air version. Basically a GT3 RS transformed into this. And like, I love how it drives. I love how it drives so much, but also it's extreme. To save weight, there is a 3-minute video that Porsche sent me for the roof to raise and lower, because you basically have to construct the roof every time. It's fully manual. You have to, detension the wire that is at the back of the roof. You have to roll it up, fold it, get it into the exact spot, because it saves 7 kilos or something. It's 15 pounds, but you got to do it.
Not the car you want to get caught in the rain.
No, but it's 500 horsepower. It revs to 9,000 RPM. It's basically a race car. Yeah, it's the most thrilling thing I've driven all year in terms of just like the emotions. But it's slightly compromised to do that. Like I think as much as I love it, I would go for a regular 718 Spyder if I had to live with it every day, unless I live next door to a track, and then this would make sense.
It's funny how a 500 horsepower Spyder, basically a Boxster, doesn't sound that powerful, like after what we just talked about. Whereas when it came out, if you said, oh, it's going to be 500 horsepower version, this could be like, oh my god, like, that's ridiculous power. But
yeah,
that's the world we live in.
Yeah, like when the first Boxster launched, they're like, it's 201 horsepower. People are like, okay.
Yeah. Wow, a little mid-engine vehicle. All right, so moving on to more horsepower.
Coming in second is the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing.
It is my personal favorite car, so big surprises here. And number 1 and number 2 were miles ahead score-wise on everything else. I think this could have been one, or would have been maybe a tie, had it been the manual. I think the only thing that held back the Cadillac CT5V Blackwing was I had the 10-speed, and it's still a really good 10-speed. It's just, it takes away a little bit of the fun. Like, what I love about the Blackwing is with the rev match and all the track modes, the manual is just so engaging. I mean, it's not the best manual. I know I got torn apart by Cadillac fans saying it's great. It's like, it's really good for a big meaty V8, but go drive, for instance, some of the Porsche manuals or some of the other ones out there in that price range. It's not Cadillac's fault. You have to have something that can handle all that power and torque. So it's got to be reinforced. But it's just, you put it in tour mode and it's a CT5, which I drove a regular version and I'm really a big fan of too. I fit the family, no problem. It's very luxurious. It's very comfortable. It handles well. And then I turn it into a monster when I want to. And with the 10-speed, when you put it in sport or track, the backfire pops and bangs it makes are nonstop and crazy loud. Like it's almost embarrassing. Not for me because I don't care, but
you wouldn't want that mode. Shame.
Yeah. Like, I just imagine driving down some like a Porsche Rodeo Drive and this fitting in with all the other high-end cars. It's so loud. But it's, yeah. And in this blue, oh man, it looks so good with all the carbon packages.
It's true. It does look good. It looks better than that first one that you got to drive a few years ago.
But that was the ultimate under the radar. So it was pearl black with carbon. Like, it just looked like nothing.
True. So. Yeah, it's really good. And I think, you touched on the ability for it to change its character pretty broadly from like, just cruising around to going nuts. And I think that was a theme for these top few vehicles, including the top one.
And number 1 is the Hyundai Ionic 5N.
And number 1, it is, I'll let Kyle take it away because he's driven it many times and he loves this guy.
Yeah, apparently I drove it something like 4 times this year. It is the 2025 Hyundai Ionic 5N. I'm sure people have heard a lot about it this year. It is showing up all over the place. It won Performance World Car. It really is, even more so than the Taycan, the first EV that feels like it was made for driving fun. Not exceptional performance like the Taycan, because the Taycan is silly quick and it set a Nürburgring time that is super impressive. It's just, this is different because it seems like it wants you to have fun all the time, at any speed, not just on a racetrack, although it is very accomplished on a racetrack. And you drove it too, Mike, to be fair.
Yeah, so I was waiting for you to do all your spiel on why it's number 1, and I may be one of, if not the only, automotive reviewer who's not crazy about this car. Like, I think it's a good car, and it's cool they did this, but everyone goes on like it's the second coming of automobiles, and to me it's like, it's okay, but I've driven a lot of high-powered EVs, and maybe because I didn't have it on a racetrack, but it's like, it makes noises, fake noises. I mean, it has that, but yeah, it's just, it's cool, but I don't think it's as, I don't know. Like, I don't want to make it sound like I don't like it, because I do like it. I just don't think it's like the most amazing car. There's a lot of things in that price I would take before it. EV, maybe not, because that's like its thing. But yeah, it's just, it's really good. I'm glad Hyundai did it. It's just not my, I'm just not, I don't know. I just didn't get connected to it like everyone else did. I was so excited to drive it. When I drove, I was like, this is a lot of fun. And it's ridiculous, and it's so powerful. But it's not, I guess the way I can describe it, it's not one of those cars that after the fact I couldn't stop thinking about or talking about. It's just like, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I like, because I think about like both of the top 2 are vehicles that we feel strongly about. And that's to your point, and I mean, you drove the pre-facelift for the Blackwing, that's how I felt about the interior of the Blackwing. Like, driving it, it's fantastic. But then I get out of it and I'm like, I don't even remember what was in there.
It's definitely very GM inside. I mean, it's nice GM, but
but I think like it's having these two top our list really tells you like where the automotive space is heading. Is we have a very traditional and probably the last of its kind V8 manual, well, automatic sedan, but a big powered ICE sedan, and then we have this overgrown hatchback of an EV.
Yeah, utility, which is not really. It's funny because you look at the top two, like, oh, they picked two cars that make about 660 horsepower. It's like, well, there's a big difference. And like you said, I think we've talked about this, that there is no supercharged V8s, I think, left after Jag kills theirs off, except for the CT5 and the Escalade V. Like they share that engine. And if you get to that size car with a manual, there are none. But yeah, I think we've said it so many times. Like, look at the top. I can't remember number 5 was. Look at the top 4, let's say. You have ridiculous performance in 4 very different ways. Like, we're so spoiled right now at this time. If people are like, go on saying cars aren't good or they don't have fun or soul, it's like, people are going to remember this period, I think, in 20, 30 years and be like, oh, remember how good cars were back then? So,
yeah. We're living in the golden age. So you just pointed out, our top 4 are all high-performance cars.
But it's almost like well, 2 of them are sedans.
Yeah,
three of them have a back seat. This one even has a hatch. So, but that's why I think they got scored so high. Is look what these manufacturers did with relatively, I wouldn't say regular cars, because it's hard to call a Taycan regular, but they went overboard and they work. I mean, there's others that go overboard with their cars, and you're like, yeah, it's a bit much. But these ones work.
It's like we said earlier on in this. It's like fitness for purpose matters, and all of these cars like completely nail their objective, and I think that's what makes a truly great car.
Yeah, like this one that's number 1. I mean, it can do everything. It can take a family. It can go camping. It can go to a racetrack. It can drag race almost anything that isn't electric and beat it. It's very, very well done. So that's our top 10 for this year. Next year, who knows what we'll drive and what'll make the list. There's lots to look forward to, and there's going to be a list about that on AutoGuide.com. You can check out shortly after this video drops. But thank you for watching, and if you don't agree with our picks, I'm sure we'll hear from you and let us know what your top 10 are.